I know somebody who was an opera singer in Germany, and she was telling me that she used to make good money and respect and all of that as an opera singer there, and very comfortable living. And then she comes here to US, and you're a struggling artist.
Yeah, no, it really, because the pay has stayed the same, but then expenses, like the standard of living.
Or it's also about the respect ultimately, but because you value artists means you pay them more.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it's a cultural difference between certain parts of the world.
And I think a deterioration of the potential in America for the artist, unfortunately.
Gotta breathe out. I'm losing my cool. I'm on the edge. Something's taking over me. I'm gonna be down on my knees. You know I'm ready for this. You keep me begging for this.
This is the Ocio Show with Rahul, where I have deep conversations with interesting people on topics that are meaningful, slightly personal, and perhaps controversial.
Roll with this. I can do this all day. I can do this all day. Back up, I'm gonna run this town. I'm headed for the top and you know it's going down.
All right, welcome to episode 8 with Tom Disher on the Ocio Show with Rahul. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Rahul.
I'm super excited to have a musician on the show. So you have been a performer your whole life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How did you get into music?
Well, I mean, I think I was 7. And I was like, we had a piano in my basement, and I was banging on it and singing at the top of my lungs. And my mother was like, "Do you want to take piano lessons?" And I was like, "Yes." And so
Was this your mother's piano, your father's piano, or?
Yeah. It was my mom's piano. My grandparents bought it in the Roaring '20s for my aunt, who played the piano, and so it was like this beat up old piano. It was really, really fun. But then I got into a rock band with my brother, who was older, and then I was studying classical piano and went to classical music school.
On that one, so why piano? Was it because it was there at home?
In part, it was there. Yeah. So my brother was playing guitar, and so I was a keyboard player. And so
was your younger brother?
He's older, actually.
Older
so
brother
he
kind
of got me. Yeah. So he kind of like
sidekick.
shoehorned me into But then he didn't stick with music, and I did.
But did you? So you took piano lessons when you were young in school?
Yeah.
And where did you grow up?
In Washington D.C., Bethesda, Maryland, actually.
Maryland. Okay, and you took. And were you part of the school band or
not as much then, actually, really. No, I was like more in rock bands, jazz bands. I played a lot of jazz. I heard John Coltrane when I was 13, and I was like, oh my God, it was like, I saw Jimi Hendrix, and I love like his improvisatory energy and all that. But then when I heard John Coltrane, I was like just blown away by just this intense spiritual energy coming out of that horn, and just like right off the bat, I was like, yeah, that whole ability to project that energy, so probably should have taken up the saxophone, but piano was already my instrument.
So I'll stick with piano.
Yeah.
And then you went to college in DC?
I started there, and I went to school there. I had a really great Hungarian piano teacher, and
you went to undergrad for music?
Yeah, so I started there, and that was at Montgomery College, and then I transferred to Hart College of Music in Hartford, Connecticut, because there was a couple of choices that she was directing me towards, because I really wanted to go someplace that had a jazz program, and so Hart had. I had a really great. Mary Stanton was a really wonderful classical piano teacher, but also Paul Jeffries was Charlie Mingus's musical director, and he would come up every week.
And then you went to school and you graduated.
Yeah.
From that, and then you knew you wanted to be in music. I mean, that's why you went to school, and then you went to you started doing some gigs with the band.
Yeah,
after that?
I was really lucky because another friend, pianist, actually sent me off to a gig in Eastern Connecticut, and these guys actually they had $500,000 grant to culturally enrich Eastern Connecticut. It's like an economically downtrodden area where they had closed the mills and so forth. And so we had a jazz band, we had a rock band, we had like this musical theater thing at Eastern Connecticut Performing Arts Company. There were about 45 of us, and it was an amazing experience. And it was a steady paycheck. And, I think we had like something like 12 different musical ensembles out of the 12 musicians that we had. It was fantastic.
These are all jazz musicians?
They were jazz, they were rock. What was his name? Otis Reed was, he was like an R&B singer. He had an 8-piece, band. And so this was like enough momentum to get together with an amazing jazz singer that I worked with, toured with her for a few years, Loretta Edel, and she never crossed the threshold into being really famous. There's a lot of story behind that, but that would take a whole nother interview.
Yeah. And then you did a couple of years of that.
Yeah.
And then you were playing piano, and there was bass and
bass and drums.
drum and vocalist, right?
Yeah.
On this, and is that a general combination for a jazz band?
Yeah. It's like a trio backing a jazz singer. Just phenomenal.
And do these jazz bands stay long together generally?
Some of them do. A band like this one was a very tight unit.
Yeah.
And but things sort of fell apart because it's a long story. But you can always cut this out if you want to. But so she was gay, and we played at this bar that like this new woman had come to town.
Yeah.
And she had purchased this motorcycle bar. And so like she, Pat was a tough gal, and she was from Jersey, and this these bikers were not crazy about the fact that there was like a jazz band, and we were really energetic. I mean, I think we were playing the song "Another Star" by Stevie Wonder, and Loretta was just killing this song. She's just killing it. And we look over, and there's this big motorcycle dude taking a swing at Pat, and so Pat ducks out of the way, grabs him by the belt of his pants and rams his crotch into the corner of a pinball machine. And we just all stopped playing. And she's like, "Anybody else want to try it?" 3, 4, bang, we went right back into it, So like this was just too much for Loretta. She just like fell in love with Pat.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't get out of the bar quick enough before they were having sex on the pool table. And so then Pat becomes her manager. And, then it just like snowballed into this thing where nothing was good enough, like for Pat and Loretta. And so eventually, they talked us out of the little gigs.
There's a movie in there somewhere.
Oh, yeah. They talked us. I think it's okay to say this. Pat was the daughter of a mafia don. And she apparently, had just like endless sources of money. So that, getting us little gigs was like, and so she was always trying to get us big gigs, and she got us some really great gigs. We opened for a lot of famous people. But somehow she just pushed too hard and just pissed people off. And they, so that she burned more bridges than she made. And so she kind of, they got in a big fight. It was like between the drummer and her and Loretta were having this argument in the back room, and it was about like the drummer's personal philosophy, and like finally she was like, "If you don't sit down and listen to what Loretta has to say, I'm gonna break your legs." And he said, "Oh yeah, I quit." So that was the end of the band. It was sad.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And then you went back to school after that?
Well, no. I was playing with some other bands, and I went to see this band, and they were just phenomenal. I mean, like really tight. Had a blind saxophonist who had like the most amazing gravelly but perfect voice, and then the drummer had like a really high Stevie Wonder kind of voice, and the bass player was really fun party kind of song, and the guitarist had really interesting stuff, and the keyboard player was a great player and writer, and he went off to do his own career, did really well. They needed a keyboard player, and so they had a road crew, they had, a record contract, they had, like we were playing, 23 nights a month and, making really good money for really, like some larger audiences. And then we'd also go up to the ski areas in Vermont, for 2 weeks, and out to the beach for a few weeks in the summer. It was a great gig for a couple of years. And yeah, but the record didn't do anything, and I got an offer from a nationally touring band, and the day before the first gig, I called to get directions from Lefty, who was the guy that was running it, and he said, "Oh well, Mitch decided to stay in the band, so sorry." So I was out, and I was like, "I'm done with the road anyway." I'd had enough of it, and so I went back and studied composition, for film and just for pure.
Where did you study that?
At Hart College. I went back to Hart College, and they had a $500,000 computer synthesizer called the Synclavier, and so I became the graduate assistant in charge of that. I had 3 keys, one of the 3 keys to that room. Even the security guard didn't have one, and he'd be there like, "Yeah, I know you're in there." But he couldn't get in. I just was just kept on working like through the late night. And that's where I learned so much about the process of composing for electronic music. And
then
so.
After that, what did you do after you graduated from the composition music?
Well, we thought
was it a graduate level program?
Yeah, it's a graduate program. Yeah, and I thought about. My girlfriend at the time, she's my wife now, lived in New York, and we thought maybe we'd move to New York, but we couldn't find a place that was safe to store. I already had a bunch of recording equipment and a grand piano and so forth, and we actually looked at a condo in the Alphabets, and it was a co-op, which is a difference, So it was only $70,000. And it was halfway constructed. There's a pile of plaster in the middle of the floor, and it was a brownstone, beautiful brownstone leaning against these big wooden blocks, and I don't know what happened, but somehow it just fell into the street, and so that they tore down the building and built, a high skyscraper there, which was their whole plan. Yeah. And the thing is, if you bought a co-op for $70,000, you just lose all your money. So they just, they were just taking everybody's money, on this deal. So fortunately, we were thinking, yeah, we could do this, but fortunately we didn't. And so at that point we were like,
so the co-op the construction was.
It was like they were supposedly renovating this brownstone, but actually what they wanted to do was they really wanted to knock it down, but it was a historic thing. So, it was an accident.
So you didn't buy.
Yeah, thank God we didn't buy. Yeah, so we came out here instead, and
why San Francisco?
She lived here before, and it seemed like a good place.
And you guys met in college, or?
Well, see, I was in graduate school, and she was back. She'd been doing photography in Paris, and she decided she didn't want to be, that wasn't the career that she wanted, and she came back. Her family was in Hartford, but she really wanted to be in New York. So she was in New York, and but we thought this would be a good place to go because New York, at that time, it was so hard to make a living as an artist. I mean, you could, I had a friend, he played 5 nights a week, he drove a cab, and then he went to Florida in the winter to make some more money so he could afford to stay in New York. And so we came out here.
Is it because there's less gigs, or there's more people competing for the same number of gigs?
There's tons of gigs, way, more people. Yeah, I walked into a bar, and a guy was playing the piano, and I made a couple of requests. He says, "Oh, you're a jazz musician. Well, you must be a pianist. Well, I'll tell you, I've been here 17 years. I don't need a sub. I'm not giving up the gig. They're not hiring anybody else, okay?" Another associate of mine.
Very, very territorial on that particular one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you came down here, and then did you do gigs?
Yeah. So I was like playing 12 gigs a week in 1991. Yeah, I had 4 happy hours at the Marriott Hotel which was a lot of fun. I could play anything I wanted.
Marriott downtown?
Yeah, the Marriott. Yeah, the jukebox in the sky. You know that one. And then I had 5 nights a week at a place called Passan's over on Shattuck Avenue, which was really great gig. They had rotated different singers through there, some amazing singers, and so we had a 4-piece band with the sax, bass, drums, and keyboards, and so I led that band, and the management then would send, a Tuesday singer, a Wednesday singer, so we had Monday through Friday there, and then I worked 3 gigs a week with an agency. And then in 1992, I walked into a studio, and I never left, and the guy who ran it did.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up here.
But technically, you still do performances, not performances, but
Yes.
you still do some side gigs, I believe, right?
Yeah.
As a performer.
That's right. Yeah. I have a jazz band where we do all original stuff. And
How often do you do that?
well, we get together once a week, and we play gigs every now and then. We play places like Tipples or there's a really cute place called the Ocean Avenue Ale House. It's got a stage, and it's got a piano there. But we play
Just for
it's kind of
fun.
fun. Yeah. We have an Argentine drummer and a saxophone player or a bass player.
So, are there certain kinds of kind of person that makes a good musician?
That's a really good question. And I've been looking at this, and there's different kinds of musicians. Obviously, but there's one type who's like a really great reader, a really great orchestral player, maybe very expressive, very perfect, and not necessarily as inclined to be a performer. I mean, a composer rather, but like a really incredible ensemble and maybe solo player and like classical world, phenomenal. Then you have somebody like Bob Dylan, and people say, he can't sing, but Rolling Stone called him the best singer of the 20th century because of the way that he told a story, so there's a storytelling musician, and you got somebody like I mentioned, like John Coltrane, who's like, certainly technically advanced, but really his thing is that ability to improvise with a depth of emotion and spiritual energy that, isn't for everybody, but for a certain audience, that's everything.
And which one of these are you?
Oh, I wouldn't pretend to be as good as any of them.
In the same
But-
category.
But yeah, I would say that I would like to aspire to be, a composer that can draw, because there's another kind of person, that.
No, when it comes to composing. Sorry, when it comes to performing, where would you?
Well,
put yourself?
John Coltrane.
Coltrane.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so more
yeah.
technically sound sort of angle on this.
Right, yeah, but with the idea that you can project a nonverbal story, an energy that that the audience can be uplifted by.
And would that, if I ask you specific about somebody who's good at piano, was that a certain kind of person that makes it good with pianos?
Oh yeah. So well, I mean, there's so many different kinds of pianists. I mean, I mean, like one that's just phenomenal, is McCoy Tyner, and he was John Coltrane's pianist, and he's like phenomenal technician and just amazing improviser. Somebody who's an amazingly versatile and proficient would be like Kenny Barron. You know what I mean?
But you got to learn this skill when you're a kid, right? Because I tried to learn this recently, and it was very hard for me to learn a piano.
Yeah.
And you think these are sort of muscles that you build when you're, much younger.
It's a really good idea. Yeah.
Right? Because then it becomes very hard at some point to
Yeah.
become that. I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
How many hours do you have on the piano?
Well, I was trying to figure that out. I mean, there were 15 years when I played the piano way more than 40 hours a week. I mean, I probably played because I was playing those 12 gigs, and then I was also doing stuff during the day. And when I was in college, I was playing. I kept a record to see that I was going to hit 40 hours a week practicing. So, it might be a little generous, but I think I played the piano about 80,000 hours.
Oh wow! And what they say is like it takes 10,000 hours to make a genius on any. Like if you wanna, let's say, be good in tennis,
Yeah.
like up in the 1%, you gotta play tennis 10,000 hours basically.
Yeah.
So that's like 8x of the number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there like an international piano competition or something that you could compete in and win and stuff like
Well,
that?
the thing is this is that a lot of that I would say, was playing gigs or making stuff up or whatever, and so that there's pianists who played a lot less than me who are much better than me. I mean, I wouldn't say I wouldn't
some
hold
of it could
myself
be
up
more
as
talent,
like that as the sterling example of how to play the piano, but I know what I love and I understand what I'm doing, and I feel that I'm playing what I want to hear. I mean, but there's a relatively young guy named Javier Santiago, who recorded here at the studio just a little bit, and he's phenomenal. I mean, and I think that he's like really, intriguing in his improvisation and really crystalline in his technique and a really great guy, and so that
who's your all-time favorite pianist?
well, it might be Herbie Hancock, or it might be Chick Corea, it might be Keith Jarrett, that there's, but then again, there's Arthur Rubinstein, and Schnabel.
These are people you try to emulate or sort of
in various
do you? I mean, now that you went to school once for classical piano and then for composition and music, do you recommend people go to school to do this?
Oh, absolutely. And not necessarily for just what you're being taught, but for being in the environment of other people who are on that same spiritual path, and so that, finding the people around you that are of a like mind. You may not find that with your professors. Some people are lucky to have teachers that are focused in the same way, and there are so many different ways of learning, and so that with my classical teacher Mary Stanton was really great for developing my classical approach. At the time, I don't think that the jazz program there wasn't really nearly as focused as some of the jazz programs are today, which is, phenomenal.
What's the best jazz program in the world?
Well, there's always Berklee School of Music. It's really great.
Boston, right?
Here in town, Edward Simon is a piano teacher at the San Francisco Conservatory. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, of course, then down in L.A. at UCLA, is just a phenomenal music school. And of course, there's Juilliard, of course, and then there's lots of places. But
and you made a living as a performer, doing gigs and touring and all of that. Unless you're part of one of these big, bands, as an average performer doing gigs, how easy or difficult is it to survive in a big city like San Francisco or New York or
that's
doing these gigs? Huh?
It's a great question. I mean, like back in the 80s, I was.
Has it become better or has it become worse?
It's been worse. Oh yeah. Back in the 80s, I mean, I had I was making a middle class living, with both with the jazz singer and with and with the kind of the soul band that I was with. And when I was here in town, like I like to say, I was like driving really fast in second gear, because I had these 12 gigs a week. And so even though they were just, I mean, I think that, the happy hour, actually paid, pretty well, at the Marriott, and so did the jazz gig. And then the wedding thing, so it was a substantial middle class living, but I was playing like 12 gigs a week.
I know somebody who was an opera singer in Germany, and she was telling me that she used to make good money and respect and all of that as a opera singer there, and very comfortable living.
Yeah.
And then she comes here to US, and you're a struggling artist.
Yeah, no, it really, because the pay has stayed the same, but then expenses, like the standard of living, has
or it's also about respect ultimately, but because you value artists means you pay them more.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it's a cultural difference between certain parts of the world. Especially on certain
I think a deterioration, of the potential, in America for the artist. Unfortunately, I mean,
I'll end this segment by asking you, what was your most memorable performance as a performer?
Oh, that's a good question.
In your performing career.
Oh, that's. I mean, I guess. There's a bunch of answers to that. I mean, one of them had to be my senior recital. Playing. All that. But there was another gig that there was an African influenced musician named Michael Mills that we had this 17-piece like Afro funk fusion ensemble, and we were playing to a crowd of 20,000 people. It was just a phenomenal night, of just really jamming, really crazy stuff. I don't know if I've got pictures with Loretta, but there were nights we opened for for a lot of people. We opened for like Janice Ian and Buddy Rich and Spyro Gyra and on and on. And there like just nights when she just nailed it, and it was just like, you just feel that those chills and that energy, and the crowd like jumps to their feet, and it's just like really
the magnetism of the things going right.
And just and just at the other end of the spectrum, our jazz band called the Left Coast Project, a little while ago we were playing like in a at Bear Bottle, on a Sunday afternoon, like really just like this, like unpretentious brewery, and we were playing an original tune, and Eric Scheid, the saxophone player, just like nailed it, and just like a bunch of people that like screamed, and it was like, it was just like a crappy little gig, but it was, it's just something, just a moment, and because in the end, it's those moments that it's really, that's really why we do it.
Worthwhile.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you for the chat, and we'll end the segment here, Tom, and we'll come back after a break.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome to the second segment of our conversation with Tom Disher. So, Tom, you moved away from, well, not away, but tangentially to doing composition.
Yeah.
And you now do sound in movies.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, when I was in graduate school, I had a really great teacher who did mostly, theatrical sound design. But I learned a lot about microphone technique and placement and the creation of sounds and the way to collect sounds and how they work with picture. And then, but really what happened was, so I had a good knowledge of that and a good understanding of how music works with picture to help tell the story. Because, just a side thing is that the Greeks talked about three purposes for music. They had music for theater, music for dance, and music for religion, right? And so songs really are theater, but movie is essentially theater. It's essentially using music to underline a story to help tell it, and in some ways. I think that connection, of supporting a deeper story with music, with the unspoken elements of it, is actually something that really I really identify with, and that kind of spills over, in the spectrum of sound effects for and also just the quality of voice, the quality of sound, and so these are all things that really. Like we're very much, like I really resonated with. And so, but I walked into a studio in 1992 and I never left, and that guy who ran it did. And candidly, he was more interested in, writing, songs, and he had a bunch of money and he went off to Oregon. He raised his, thoroughbred horses, good for him. Yeah. It's like perfect. And, but I found a real ability to and it's sort of like it's kind of like painting versus dancing. I mean, to be a dancer, you have to perform every night, and it's gone, and it's an ephemeral experience. You do it and then you witness it and it's done. Painter, you paint it, you put it on the wall, it's there forever, and so
unless you record the dance and put it on YouTube.
Well, that's very true. That's
these days. Okay,
Yeah.
so you got into that through your somebody who owned the studio, and you took over that studio.
That's right. Yeah.
And then they were doing sound for movies and
a lot of commercials and industrials and PBS. Like we had gotten a connection with the local station here back when they did more of their own production, and we did some really interesting films and just began to bring in a fair number of documentaries, but also then we got involved with the independent film community and then lots of commercials and various industrial sort of marketing pieces and some technical things as well.
So how many commercials and composing have you done, like in your career?
Well, I mean, we've done thousands of commercials, and we've mixed more than 300 films, and I've scored more than 40 feature-length films, and lots of short things, and lots of kind of unusual, interactive, some game work, and
how do people find people? Is it more like word of mouth, a referral, or like finding on Yelp, completely. Or like how does this happen?
Yeah, it's almost completely by word of mouth. When it comes to something like, I mean, I imagine that even when we get ADR, we work on Hollywood films doing automated dialogue replacement or dubbing. In other words, when something goes wrong on the set or whatever, and they need to replace some of the dialogue, we do, like a star will be here in town, we'll record, somebody like, Julia Roberts or Robert Redford or Danny Glover or Michelle Yao, they'll come in, to do that, or Crunchyroll will do their anime with some people that live here. So we do those type of things. So we got a good report from somebody else who does that, but when it comes to making a film, then it's even much more of a referral that, we did a good job on somebody else's film. And so the filmmakers, they kind of talk to each other. And
they're probably the warm referrals for these ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you, since owning the studio, is that the first sort of foray into composition for you? Or because you studied composition and music,
Yeah.
like commercially, is that you working for this man who owned the studio? Was that your first sort of sound engineering sort of composition and
It
all
was
that?
it was
or-
my first like consistent professional thing. I think that I had a few different projects. One of them was with Pachi Pastor, who was a scuba diver, and he also he had it wasn't Scuba Guides International. It was Scuba Gods International, just so you know. Yeah, so you can imagine. Yeah, Pachi is a real character, and he was Basque and but American, and but anyway, yeah. So he had a show that about scuba diving, and so I scored that. That was probably my first paid gig, and really interesting character. I mean, really super fun, and began to learn about the very personal nature of, because that's ultimately, like I write my music, but really I'm like tapping into like actually like how somebody wants to tell their story.
Story, yeah.
So that
And music
that's
is
the key
essential
thing.
to the story because
Yeah.
I've seen some of these documentaries and features without music, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like it's
Yes.
not fun, as much fun.
It's not as much fun. You don't
Music
get the
actually
depth.
is like half of the story, actually, in my
It
opinion.
really is. Yeah, and it depends on the filmmaker. I mean, I think that I've had experiences where the filmmaker, especially with a more, I would say, fortunately, I would say a dated version of the PBS documentary. They want a very minimal amount of music. They want to keep it very subtle and simple. I could do that.
No. I've seen some of those previous documentaries back in the day.
But on the other hand, I mean, like great experiences with, one that we did 25 years ago was called Surfing for Life, and David Brown made this amazing story about surfing and how it's like a healing, like process, how it keeps you alive. And
So for that one, you probably got to go get the waves and all that. Like, is that something you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
do, or is that somebody else gives you that footage or like sound and all that?
both of the, I mean, and as a matter of fact, we had done a film about Mavericks from another filmmaker, and we had recorded a bunch of stuff, and so when David saw that, he said, "Oh, okay. So you guys like, you have like good control of," because the thing about like water goes, and it's like, even though we feel the power there when you record it, it's like very, it's like there's always that high frequency there, and so that to build an effective moving wave thing, you need to like layer stuff in. Like right now, just recutting a film called A Long Road to the Tao, which is based on the book Tao of Surfing, and so again, like things that we recorded, like down at Pillar Point, which is where Mavericks is. We recorded down in Big Sur. We recorded up in Point Reyes. Not all just for this movie. I mean, over the last 25 years, I've recorded in all these places, even just down at Ocean Beach. But then you get, the thing is that you build this from something subtle to really strong, and you would think that when you see the wave, you think that that's what it's going to sound like, because that's what it feels like when you're there, but you have to really sculpt it, and so it becomes this whole process.
It's not just like putting your iPhone near the wave and saying, "Hey, this is what the wave is."
Right, yeah. But and then of course he had the whole perspective, again, a very subjective idea about like so that we would use there's 5 different styles of surf guitar that he wanted to emulate, like, so using that, but following the story, not just making a song. We also did a big band for it, for some of the World War II stuff, and so I had a 17-piece big band, like classic Johnny Mercer style thing.
And what has been your sort of most interesting composition in your composing career?
Well, I think in terms of film, certainly we did one recently called Run Tiger Run, and it was
It's like a Run Lola Run sort of version of.
yeah, except it was Chinese, and actually an animation about an 11-year-old kid, and it's kind of Pixar style thing, and so full. We had a half a dozen Chinese musicians. I used a bunch of classical players. We recorded it all in the studio, but it ends up being like a full orchestra with with 6 Chinese soloists. And then I also played the dizi, which is the Chinese flute, and I play a little bit of pipa. Ben, one of my engineers, is a really great guitarist. He also played the pipa some, like a shredding guitar kind of thing. It was really, really fun. We also used a virtuoso named Shen Shen, who played a bunch of pipa for us, and the kusheng, which is the plucked zither, and so Chinese percussion, and I also own a kusheng. I played some of it, the simple stuff myself.
How did you learn these instruments? I mean, from piano.
You just pluck the thing, and I mean, but I can't do the 4-finger technique, and all that, but I can just get simple heartfelt melody and certain progressions and certain sounds, and the other thing I can do is edit. So that like I know what I want, and I record, a little of this, that's not quite right, stack up something, until it sounds like I want it to.
And this was not Hollywood. This is a Chinese mainstream movie and animated movie, and released in theaters and all that.
The good news is it came out in 1,600 theaters in China. The bad news was that it came out on Chinese New Year's of 2022, which was 2 weeks after the second shutdown in China because of COVID, and so that was difficult moment for that film, and so. Now they've got it translated to English, and they've got it. It's showing in Spain and Russia, but they're trying to get distribution in America. Amazing film, though, and so I mean there were 11 of our team that did the sound design, and Paul Zonley, was my lead engineer for the last 25 years. Mixed it, and then I had all those musicians, and did the whole scoring and all that.
Any most memorable composition that you have done for like a documentary or feature?
Well, one of them was there was. This is kind of a funny one, but there was a movie called Chronicle. It was a lot of it was just sourced music, really, mostly. But so they had me do this composition. There's like Chronicle is about like these guys that have this kinetic power, and so they're doing this thing with Legos where it's like rising up, like they're actually able to rise it up with their mind, and so they want it like we want it big. No, bigger than that. We wanted, so I had, 17, brass parts and a full orchestra. No, bigger than that. It's like, more percussion, worse. It's like, don't start that soft. Like, start loud and get louder. So we did that, and then so we go to the theater, and I was like, grab Maureen, my wife's hand, like, this is it. It's the Lego scene, and I hadn't seen it, and so the he starts to do the thing, and the guy pulls out his iPhone and pushes play on it, and so my huge piece of music is coming out of the iPhone. Like, no, oh man, so I was like, I was like, but so that was kind of a shocker.
You don't decide where they use it, huh?
Yeah. That was their prerogative. They still paid me well.
Yeah.
But maybe in 2001 I did a film called John Wooden, Victory, Values, and Peace of Mind, and that won an Emmy, here in Northern California for composition, and so that was a like kind of a nice high water mark for me then.
Is that they winning the Emmy, or like The show won the Emmy.
No, the music one.
Music one.
Yeah, one for composition.
Got it,
Yeah.
got it. And do you get the Emmy or
Yeah,
like?
yeah.
Is it like an award, like an Oscar? Or?
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
it's not as good as an Oscar, but I'll take it.
Yeah, sure. I'll take it too.
Yeah.
So what's the process for composition? Let's say I'm a up and coming movie creator. I want to come to you. Hey, Tom, I heard good things about you. Like, okay, help me. Like, it's a thriller where it's in the edge of the seat. Somebody's gonna get killed, and somebody's gonna, find out, who and take revenge on this. Like,
Yeah,
How do you like compose something for?
Well,
something
yeah,
like
that's
that?
a great.
Like
great,
they come to you with the idea, like,
Yeah.
and then what happens? Like, walk me through the process on this.
Well, it's interesting because there's, so many different ways that people have approached me. With Joey, especially with the previous film that we had done, Tofu. Like he didn't give me any ideas. He wanted to hear things from me, and I had plenty of time. I had. From that, I had 18 months on his first feature, and so that I would send him sketches. He it was an animated thing, so he would send me his animatics, which are hand drawn, pictures that like the character, like following the story. And so I sent him themes, and so it wasn't only thing I was doing, but I would send him, an idea. And he was very particular. So no, that's not it. Sent him another idea, which I thought was really great. No. I sent him a few other ones. So then I came back to that second idea and I sent it to him a month later and he's like, that's perfect. And I never told him it was. So Joe, if you're hearing this, yeah, that was the second. So that for him, it was like, no, I'm not going to.
The idea at the right time is also important, right?
Yeah.
Just the idea.
Yeah. And so other people, I mean, they will give me examples, like very specific examples, and they'll be always like, this is the other extreme. They'll be like, can you make it more like that? And it's like, well, I don't really want to make it more like that because
I'll change a note.
yeah, right. I don't just want to change a note. I really want to.
Yeah.
I want to emulate the spirit of that, but I don't want to make it like that. And so, and then in between that, there's people that they might give me some influences, or can you there's a film called Death of a Shaman for was a documentary, and so I listened to a bunch of Mien music. This was about family that had immigrated from the land between Cambodia and Vietnam, and really really sad story of their life in America, but for that I just had an idea, and I showed it to them, and they loved it. And so, it started out with this drone, and it ended up with a violin. Like, Anthony Blaise is a really just amazing violinist, and he just he nailed it, and so we did a film called about Aldo Leopold, and who was like a famous, I like to say the most famous environmentalist that nobody ever heard of. He phenomenal filmmakers, Ann and Steve Dunsky, that told this story in conjunction with the Forest Service, and so they had general influences, like a bunch of general influences, but they left it up to me. And, so I showed them ideas that I did with, mock orchestra. And they were like, oh, that sounds great. That's perfect. Let's use that. And I was like, well, I'm going to, hire the French horn and the string players. It's like, no, you don't even need to do that. It's like, well, when you hear the difference between, because this sounds really good, but when you hear these musicians play this stuff, you'll know the difference. And they're like, oh, yeah, that does sound better, So it was, so that one I had like the best combination of some influence from them, but a real chance to just watch the film, understand. Because here's the other part. You're asking me like so I understand like how the filmmaker wants to tell their story, but the more that I can relate to the story,
and you can better. Yeah, it's immersive, right? So
Yeah.
it's coming from the soul, like some of these.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So so then the way that they lay out their film, there's like enough narration, or and dialogue, but not too much, and then pictures and a chance to really observe, and it's like when you have that picture, you have a reason to look at that picture, and then you and it's just evolving, then that's like it's just like that's where the music goes, that's the direction that the music takes, and so that was
is
a
the
great
composition for movies different from documentaries versus commercials generally, or what's the major?
Well, it can be. The thing is that with a narrative film, you're more likely to be more dramatic in your composition. But there's plenty of documentaries that do take a very dramatic approach. And so I mean, the key thing is what is the story? And how does the filmmaker want to tell it? And to find that point, there can always be an aspect of style and history and place in either of them. I mean, you could take an approach where, for example, like some of the stuff in Surfing for Life, was very specific, to that locations. Other parts were not so specific to that style. The Cherokee Word for Water is one that we did that was very, kind of what Charlie Soap was the husband of the first Cherokee female chief named Wilma Mankiller, and he said to me, well, we're really more cowboys than we are Indians, which not really entirely true, but at the point was that they wanted a real country influence in their music, and that's what they loved, and so that was a starting point. But it was like, so then from there, then you could evolve, following the story, putting in more energy, less energy, and so forth, and positive tone, subdued tone, and, challenging.
Yeah. And for commercials, it's more like quick impact and sort of jingles or like
there's also often a turning point, like a difference between a well-composed commercial and slopping some music in there is often that there is a little bit of a problem, and a little bit of a solution, at least, political ads, the same thing, it's like, here's the bad part, but wait, here's our hero. What trouble are the pets getting into? For Petco. But then wait, here's the happy ending. So that there's like, a little bit of a story arc there.
Yeah, story arc there.
Yeah,
got it. As a composer, what's sort of your pinnacle of success? Is that an Oscar? Is that like an Emmy, Grammy?
It would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, getting an Oscar would be awesome. I mean, candidly, I think that I've worked with some Oscar-winning filmmakers, but not to compose for them. I mean, because like I say, I've scored, more than 40 films, but we've mixed more than 300, and so that. But they didn't win the Oscar for the one that I mixed anyway. But so that.
Is that an Oscar for mixing?
Well, there is a sound. Yeah, there is a sound.
Sound engineering or sound.
Yeah,
editing.
there is absolutely.
And there's a lot of technical Oscars that people generally do. They don't televise on the day of Oscars.
They play a little music and the list goes like flying by.
And then, of course, the Grammys. Is there a category for this, or
Well, they sort of do have a soundtrack category, absolutely. But yeah, it's not really as
not for movies? So that's a
it's not.
separate.
Yeah, it's really more about the song than it is about like
Do you independently do, say, somebody wants to do an album, or is that sort of thing that do you guys help out with that?
We
or-
do, yeah. We have a client, Hit Records, that Tom Donald runs. That where he does songs, and he will do a lot of the production, himself, and then he'll come in, especially to record the singers or the brass players. He has a fair amount, or some of the guitar work or whatever. When you really, so we'll mic up a really good amp, and again, he often hires Ben, who's such a great guitarist, but yeah, he'll usually bring in the vocalist, and then we may or may not mix that. He might mix it himself. And we're doing that also for Cambodian singers. That we recently recorded an amazing singer named Mia Satsofia. Just like, oh God, what an amazing singer. And so Darren Kerr is putting together. He put together Cambodia Day here in San Francisco. So they brought, like a dozen really phenomenal artists, like, world-class artists from Cambodia. And so we recorded live at, the Cambodia Day Festival. And then also, but she came in and recorded a song he's got a film coming out. So she came in and recorded that song. So love doing that. And we worked on a bunch of other projects. It's not our main focus, but it's something that with the right person, right time, that we love to do.
What is a music track or music in movie that you admire? Your favorite
God,
in
there's
these?
so many. But one that really, well, I mean, I have to say that Hans Zimmer, of course, is like, pinnacle of Christopher.
Which movie though?
Christopher Nolan, like, really uses him to great effect. I mean, some people don't like Christopher Nolan's approach to the mix because, like, where's the dialogue? But I mean, like, like, I love the music. The stuff in Inception, was phenomenal. I mean, my God, Batman Begins and all that stuff was really
beautiful.
really great.
Dark Knight, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, Dark Knight, exactly. Yep, Dark Knight Rises. Some people don't like Dunkirk because like the cellos sound like the airplanes coming in, but I love that, and I thought that was a really powerful score, and the connection between the sound design and the music was really strong, and of course the score for Oppenheimer is just like phenomenal.
Yeah. And in these compositions, is it generally, do you guys like say, hey, compose 2 songs for me and this is how much you get paid, sort of thing? Or like, is it like how many hours you work, or is it generally, how does the business of composition work generally?
Well, there's
Here's my budget, like you make something for it.
Yeah. For somebody like Hans Zimmer, of course, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's like, here's my rate.
Yeah.
So
it depends on a lot of things. I mean, the one of the factors, of course, is how many musicians you need to hire,
sure.
and then how much time you have to spend doing that, so how many minutes of music is another measurement, but then I mean, for something like, for example, like I composed a portion of the music for Enduring Democracy, David Shendel's film, and so for that, there was just like there were just certain cues that I had to do that, and another film of his called The Most Beautiful Noise. I just did the opening theme and the end theme, and then he had another composer do the rest. And so again, then it's down to, how much, how
We
much
amortize
what my
all of
expenses.
these costs to and margins to
Yeah.
then charge the. But is that not like in the industry? It's not like, hey, you work for 2 days, here's what the rate you get, sort of thing, or is it more of
Well, yeah,
what you bring?
it's
to the
kind
table?
of more of a package deal usually for the music. I mean, based on so that when
Unless you're Hans Zimmer, yeah. So
yeah, right, yeah. So that it's like a wildly varying scale depending on what needs to be done. Also, part of it depends on the complexity of the music that you're doing, because if you're doing a full orchestra, then there's a lot more labor involved with and then if you have a couple of soloists, and just like some little bit of supporting sound, it's a lot easier to do, of course. If I'm just playing the piano, then that might be a whole different.
what's the mecca of these sound and music? Is that all happening in LA generally, or New
It's
York?
for so long
or-
it's been LA,
Yeah.
but then there's a whole school of it in New York as well. And then
And outside of US, where does it happen mostly?
there's been a lot of course, London, I mean,
London, yeah.
as a matter of fact, I mean, like that's where, a lot, like Hans likes to record, in there, and also in Germany and Austria, and then it's a little less expensive to record in Czechoslovakia and in Budapest and other
There's stuff
places
happening in China and all that now.
There is some, but even for Zhao Yi's film, his name's Joey, for Ants Animation, and it was first company, and then Solar was his latest company. We did all the recording here, in part because, well, the soloists, the Chinese soloists that I've had, are world class. They're like, and most of them were born in China and they travel the world, but they're here, and just recording them here, and then having that direct rapport and relationship with them to produce exactly what I wanted to fit the film in a certain way. It was best to do it here. You can't fault the quality of anything coming out of the Chinese performers, for sure.
And I'll end this segment by asking you, who's the best sort of sound designer for, in the world that you
That's
forever?
That's really a great question. One that was like really phenomenal was Johan Johansson, but he passed away. He did Arrival, and he was doing Denis Villeneuve's films, and now Hans Zimmer has taken over his stuff doing Dune. I love Johnny Greenwood, from Radiohead. He did Paul Thomas Anderson's films, and like his music for There Will Be Blood, for example, is like riveting. And again, some people like they don't. It's like so in your face. They don't like it so much, But for me, I mean, it's just like phenomenal.
Well, on that note, thank you, Tom. We'll end our second segment here. We'll come back after a break.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to our last segment with Tom Disher. This is Ocio Show with Rahul. So, Tom, you own a recording studio, and you sort of grew up in the ranks, doing a bunch of stuff, in the recording studio. So, why did you sort of, build a recording studio?
It's a very kind of a Taoist kind of thing where these are the things that unfolded, and that's how I ended up here. I always had a tremendous love for, music, of course, and film and sound and the idea of creating something with a sense of of permanence in a way, that and also also being part of a larger story, so that all these things kind of converge in, because we're in particular, we are an audio post-production studio. I mean, we are a music studio as well, but the thing is that most of our business is focused on collaborating with filmmakers, with with all different kinds of, like with not only radio, immersive projects, games, creating sounds for all different kinds of things. I mean, we created sounds for the Da Vinci surgical robot. 500 sounds. You wouldn't even think of the fact that you're going into this operation, and when it goes, it means something very specific to that surgeon because he's put his foot in the right place over the proper pedal. And when he steps on it, depending on which position it's engaged in, it makes a different sound that's correlated to how hard he's pushing on it. So
do they dictate what the sound should be, or do you tell them what that sound should be?
Well, Mike Hanishek was the user interface designer, just phenomenal, and so that his idea was incredible, and so he had a very specific idea, for just about every sound. It had to be short, had to be distinct, it had to be no more than absolutely necessary to be identified, and. He told me an amazing story, and that he said, Tom, when I went to Japan, I was booked in a beautiful hotel, and when I got to this beautiful hotel, they told me that they were overbooked. But in less than a minute, I was happy that they had overbooked because they had explained it so beautifully and had made other arrangements for me, and so that's what I want the Da Vinci to sound like. It's like, okay, that makes sense to me. So if there's a problem, it's like, it lets you know. I mean, there's a lot of sounds that are not problems, and there's a lot of sounds that hopefully nobody ever hears, that would tell you very specifically when something, something were out of alignment or what have you. But most of the, so that he had and that hum sound, I worked on that one for quite a while. And in the end, like, I used part of his voice for that sound. It wasn't just his voice, but it was like that his that like that's actually like a little bit of Mike in there himself.
And you recorded all that in your studio?
Yeah.
And when you build, I mean, you work for certain recording studios, and you build the one you have, the Disha studio from scratch.
Yeah.
How do you build a recording studio?
Well, unfortunately, it's a very technically precise construction project, and so when we built our, the second studio on Townsend Street, we had somebody who had built studios before, and I had my really great friend Adam King, who's an architect, was not restricted in his at that time. He was like later assigned with BAR architects and couldn't do anything like this. But so we had a great acoustic designer who shared the math with Adam, and I've got a good understanding of acoustics and math, and so I got a really great sense of what that entailed, and so we collaborated together on that design.
So you need a space, of course.
Yeah.
And I know you need double doors.
Oh yeah.
And you need to reinforce your wall with stuff.
Yeah.
What else do you need?
Well, the thing is geometry. A lot of it's geometry. I mean, this is a box within a box. So it's resting on certain rubber pucks, like they're like these little rubber things. They cost $10 a piece, and there are certain calibration, and you've got the other ones around the wall holding the weight, and so the box is floating in space and hopefully not connected to anything in the building. I mean, unfortunately, you've got your air conditioning and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's the isolation factor. But the other factor is the geometry and the conditioning of the surfaces. And so you don't want a room to be too dead, and you don't want things to bounce around too much. And so there's certain we have a Dolby Atmos compliant mixing stage where we mix our films, and there's certain geometry, the angles of the walls, the amount of sound absorption versus reflection, the certain size, so that they have a minimum size, of what will sound like equivalent to being in a larger theater, and so that you do all that math and place everything right, and then you measure, and but we had a blank canvas when we built our latest studio, and because it was just an empty floor, and so we were able to draw exactly what we wanted. Of course, there's pillars, and you have to work around the pillars, but our piano live room is essentially 5-sided, and so that things kind of bounce around like that. They don't go blah, 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 like that. The mixing stage is has two walls, 7.5 degrees, that get wider, get a certain amount of conditioning on the ceiling, a certain amount of padding on the walls, and so I was able, it's like really classic, but it's very true. I actually drew this on a napkin. I mean, literally. It's like, okay, this is going to go like this angle, and then that's going to put the drum room, in between here as a buffer, and then piano room's over here, 5-sided, and then the control room, will be large enough to accommodate extra people in the back, and then the Studio C, the utilitarian room, will have a smaller booth that's extra quiet. And which like the Japanese government wanted to do translation software, and they recorded 20,000 paragraphs per male and female, and they tried 10 studios in the Bay Area, and they liked our specs best for the small room, and so that one has a very tight sound, and there's a certain calculations. Again, it's sort of off-angle wedge-shaped, and it has a certain amount of padding, but there was still one problem, and with in a room that size of mid-bass, bass kind of like sound, and so then we built a bass trap, 18 inches deep by 4 feet wide, put it at an angle in the corner, and got it right.
Yeah, and is there some consulting firms that go around the world building these cool music recording studios?
Yeah. And so Charles Salter Associates was our consultant, but Dennis Stearns was the construction, and he did so much of fine detailed work, that in terms of making sure that the isolation was good and making sure that the padding was right. And because the thing is that it all sounds like like just technical considerations, but actually what it's really about is actually making a space where things sound optimal, where it's really quiet so that you can record, but also so that you can hear, and that also so that it's an environment that just like it's like this open palette for you to be creative. And so then the other aspect of it, of course, then is making it humanly, like inviting, accessible, comfortable, and that extends then also to, of course, to the people that run it.
That brings us to once you build a studio, you got to operate it. So what are things required to operate a studio?
Let's see. Well, there's great people.
And these are like engineers required to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and people that understand people, because especially, in well, really any aspect of whether you're doing music or film or whatever, it's really about, understanding how people want to tell their stories and understanding, the best way to work together and to deliver what they want in technically correct, creatively magnificent, and tuned to the aesthetic of the director.
And they probably need to understand certain technologies behind these sound
Absolutely.
editing and
Yeah.
mixing and designing. What are some of the technologies used in a recording studio?
Well, it starts with microphones, and well, we have more than 50 mics, and and some of them, are very specific, to specific uses. Other ones just do everything great, and so ultimately you can use just about anything and get what you want, but the idea of there's very clear, microphones that deliver a warm, full frequency sound. There's other microphones that are going to be more, close up and intimate, and so that, use the same microphone on the same person, you'd get a different sound. There's microphones that really bring out like the depth and the power of a bass drum. There's tube microphones that sound really great on the voice, but also they really, a grand piano is something very tricky to capture, depending on what you want. Like these large diaphragm Neumann 149s, like at 6 inches back from the hood, they capture that sound, and or that you put them in a room with a string quartet. And, you might have individual mics on the players, but you might just use that pair of mics because it's so natural and so perfect, and then there's on and on microphone.
Yeah.
But
What else other than microphone?
so then you got to run it through a preamp, and we have a bunch of different preamps that some are very pristine and some are really warm and rock and roll, and but really the heart of our system, which just about every professional studio uses, is Pro Tools, which is a computer digital audio workstation, and so that within that, then you have tons of plugins, and it's funny with analog tape. You have a very specific technological device that actually catches things in a certain way and makes that classic album sound. But it has to be handled right, of course. And that's I started out working with that. Now. The digital audio workstations have plugins that emulate that sound. But the problem is that these things are all too adjustable, and so that then, it's instead of it just doing its thing, you need to adjust it so that it will do its thing properly. And so, but that's so then having somebody that, an engineer that understands the ways to make those things do what's most aesthetically pleasing and technically within the parameters is a really key factor. And so again, it comes down to technology in knowledgeable hands.
The Pro Tools. Any other big tech you use inside the studio?
Well,
Mixer stuff. Is this
I
all
mean,
Pro
the
Tools?
thing is that now all that software, is what controls, our mixing surfaces. And so that, the, some of in the past, that then, you would go and there'd be a Neve console, just so great, but we have Neve preamps, and so that, then we have plugins that emulate the Neve. Is that as good as going through a Neve board? Well, maybe not. Maybe, I mean, it's still a little bit different. You could argue that, there's nothing like going, and have going through a classic Neve board. But for what we do, we've been able to really, we have more adjustable capabilities to create the sound that we're looking for, and so that I wouldn't, talk a rock and roll band out of going, someplace that had a classic, SSL or Neve or what have you. But for what we do, in particular for film, like the idea of being able to, compensate for the difficulties of sound recorded on the set, the ability to accentuate like the certain sounds that we want to shape them. There's nothing like and there's tons of plugins that that's a whole different discussion that I won't go into.
And once you build use these technologies, build the studio, operate the studio, now you gotta make money, sell the services. And is that mostly still word of mouth for you guys in the industry, or?
It really is. Yeah, it really is word of mouth. Yeah, for us. And every now and then we've taken some marketing approach or whatever. But definitely the primary thing is always really just word of mouth. And God knows we should do more with our digital presence online and so forth. I mean, but yeah.
So I mean, you have a great studio in San Francisco, Dishes Studios. I'll link it on the show notes. What are some of the best music studios you admire that you have seen?
Well, there's Capitol Records down in L.A. I mean, my God, I mean, that's just like it's such a. And the thing is that they have this big room, that Frank Sinatra and everybody else like was in, and Miles Davis was in there. The Gil Evans Orchestra is just like, oh, it's fantastic. A friend of mine had a place up in. Oh gosh, what were they called? Now I can't think of the name of his studio. He's closed now, but he had like it was like a smaller room, and they actually have the not small, but smaller than Capitol, and so they actually have the acoustic footprint of that as one of our plugins, like that has, so that we can kind of get that like cello studio. I mean, Abbey Road, my God, I mean, what a place. Air Studios, also just phenomenal places over in England and Europe. Let's see, the Vienna VSL studios, the Urcam in Paris. I mean, Urcam has done so much experimentation, and so I mean, these are all just like places that these are
iconic.
Yeah.
And you think it's still like LA is a mecca of recording here in America?
I think so. I mean,
because there's the Hollywood and
yeah.
Artists sort of composing for movies and features.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the 20th Century Fox studios down there, all that.
With as we get towards the end of our segment here, with AI and people having really powerful computers and recording self-made videos and digitally editing it using AI. What do you think of the future of recording is?
It's really tough to say. I mean, the thing is that ultimately it comes down to creativity, and so that if these are, the way that somebody finds their deepest creativity, then that's going to be fantastic.
A low barrier of entry for people just sitting at home and doing all of this stuff.
Yeah.
In a way, it spurs innovation, but on the other side, the big guys will always want to use some sort of more bigger recording studios and all of that. So, you think that's going to change in a bit, or?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, the my perspective, has always been from I love what I'm doing, and I love the people that I'm working with. You know, and I love the ideas that they come in with, and I love pondering, and and I get hot and bothered about like trying to figure out what the best way to approach something is, and I look at their picture and say, you know, how is this something that I want to devote the next 3 months of my life to, and so that if somebody like me has some AI tool that helps them do that, I don't think it's putting anybody out of business. And the thing is that if you could get an AI, to sing your song with the level of expression, that you wanted, like then I guess like it comes back a little bit to like sort of the flip side of the storytelling concept of who's telling the story, like Taylor Swift. Like let's go with like Bigger Than Big. I mean, so like her songs are great. She sounds great. Her writing is daring and impeccable, and and the Swifties all over the world just like crazy for her. Right. And so if an AI could do that, make a Taylor Swift song and even, dance that well, and have that much personality, would people have that same affinity or not? I'm not sure. My tendency would be to think not. That part of. Nothing taking anything from her talent, but it's like it's Jimi Hendrix. Anybody can, but that was Jimi Hendrix. Like amazing. Kurt Cobain. Just like wow. What a person. Charlie Parker on the alto saxophone. What a trailblazer. And the fact. There's
but more about less than the artist singing, but more about the technical aspects of, let's say, masking the noise in the background, or like making it auto-tune and like making it cooler sounding, and all that digital mixing and composing stuff. Not composing, but like more so the editing stuff, which is
now a car can drive through traffic, it can even cut me off, like, without hitting me, it can be pretty aggressive this morning, driving here, it's like, well, no, like, it's like, I'm getting in front of you, and getting away with it, same way that an aggressive driver, would have, this morning. But, so then the question is like, you can feed, your sound into noise reduction, and it will reduce the noise. But the real question though is like, and we have tools that are AI, like the latest generation of, but what
are the things that won't ever go that direction, in your opinion?
Well, let me just finish by saying that like we have like, like a large number of noise reduction tools, some of which we don't use very much anymore. But like, the question is like, which tool is going to be right for the job? Like how much to adjust it? Even the AI ones that you send it off, and you get it back, it's like, that's too much noise reduction. And it might be too much noise reduction for, like my client, like that, Fran Quijaro did an amazing film, and he liked the background sound in and so we cleaned it up. We still kept some of it and added some in, but he liked what he had in there before. So, so then, we dial it back some, we use a different tool, and so that it still comes down to, maybe like you no longer have to wash like your clothes by banging them against rocks, but you still have to control the washing machine.
Yeah. And would you say you would be doing something similar in the next 10, 20 years?
Yeah,
In terms of
probably.
I mean, barring technological rapid shifts in the world or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I think
Uh,
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is that I think that that there's certainly the ability for fewer people to do more of the work.
Out of the back.
Yeah.
Well, you can always do gigs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah. But yeah, there's like fewer people do more of the work. I think maybe another another question though that could be, like more serious is just the question of, where the financial incentive, to produce like good work, like how that shifts, and the ability for people to pay for well done work that in the consumption. Like in other words, like let's say that, if all the AI can do most of the work, and then
Then if it becomes commoditized, then somebody would want to pay for the differentiation in the market. Huh?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But that and then how many more people can't afford to pay for it and expect it for free? I mean, so then like where do people start like
Yeah.
losing
Like if
work?
every jingle in a ad sounds the same because it's all generated by AI,
Yeah.
the one who doesn't sound the same probably stands out.
Yeah, right. That's right. And I have full confidence that AI could make it sound different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, time will tell. It's
Yeah.
a very interesting sort of time, how different it can sound and all that. Well,
although there might be a shift in the quantity of work within the industry, that ultimately it is going to come down to like the storytelling of the human spirit. That's why we do music. That's why we do film. That's why you do the podcast, because you're interested in the human story. And so that even though some of that's going to shift, that ultimately we're not just here for the music. We're not just here for the spectacle.
yeah, we're not here for the AI stories, right?
Yeah. We're and God knows if AI can become that much of a real
Yeah.
creature, that we would love it.
Yeah, that we would be finding more interesting than our partners.
Yeah, right.
Like the Her movie.
Oh my God, yeah. Right. But but I mean, in the way that reached a bubble, like it popped like a zit. I mean, was Ex Machina, was a little bit more even darker than that. But I mean, so that ultimately, I think it comes back to, and why do I have a studio? Because it's a place where like I can create stuff and collaborate with people and make them feel comfortable, because ultimately, the end of the day, I'm lucky enough to be able to say that what I do, like for a living, like really feels right to me, and that I want to share that with other people. That's why I have a studio ultimately, and so that AI, will become another tool. But ultimately, that the attraction to the things that we produce is ultimately human, and so that I'm confident that humanity will
remain, yeah.
will survive.
Well, on that
in it.
note, thank you, Tom, for being on the show, and goodbye.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.